Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be joining us from. My name is Scott Anton. I manage business development with Gideon Taylor, and I am very excited to be introducing this month's Lunch and Learn featuring Concordia University, talking about some of the eForms that they've been building out and the tools or the features within GT eForms that they're using to meet specific business requirements. So even if the specific forms that Hannah and Alex are going to be talking about aren't relevant to your particular use cases, the features that they're using probably will be. So they'll give you a really good idea of how they approach meeting certain business requirements with predominantly configuration features inside the GT eForms tool. A couple of pieces of housekeeping before we get started. We will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. So if you've got questions as we go along, by all means, please post those. We may take a pause during the presentation to respond to some of those as they come in. Otherwise, we'll try to make a point of responding to any remaining ones at the end of the presentation. Everybody who is registered for this webinar will receive a link to the recording that will probably come out before the end of next week. And feel free to share that if you'd like. It will also be posted within the GT eForm resource library for all of our clients out there that have access to the library. And I also want to make note of a couple of things coming up here. One is Gideon Taylor and our partner Abtio will be co-sponsors of the Hug Europe conference next week. So any of you who might be joining us from Europe right now, hopefully we'll see you in Amsterdam next Monday and Tuesday. And the next edition of our Lunch and Learn series, which is predominantly a monthly series, except we're taking a month off for the December holidays, in January is going to be featuring a session with Gideon Taylor and Western University up in Ontario, previewing the new PeopleSoft Insights template for GT eForms. So for those of you who might be considering or using PeopleSoft Insights, there will now be a downloadable template that you can use to set that up for eForms-based data. So we're excited to be launching that. We're working on implementing that with them right now, and that'll be made available to all of our clients at no additional cost as part of your subscription. That being said, I think that's it for me. I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Hannah Liu and Alex Lee at Concordia University. Hannah, take it away.
Thank you, Scott. Hi, my name is Hannah, and this is
Alex.
We're from Concordia University in Montreal, Canada. And today we're super excited to share with you the presentation on our journey to transform PDF documents into eForms. This is the same presentation that we did in Hug earlier this year. So if you've been there, you will see it's you'll see familiar things. But we've also made a few updates since then on our progress on the new versions of it as well. You'll also find that I won't be going through the entire student experience and how I configured it. It's more about showing the features that could be applicable to your use cases. But again, if there's anything I missed, we have our information at the end of the slide, and we're happy to chat further. So don't get too scared if it feels too technical. It really is just to show that these are the things you can do, and these are the tools that are available. So let's get started. So this is me, Hannah, and again, this is Alex, and we are from Concordia University. We're in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, Jajage, and we have about 35,000 undergrad and 10,000 graduate students, 4 faculties, and plus our continuing education departments. Technical details, we are Campus Solutions 9.2, People Tools 8.5, 9.11. From 30, we are hopefully going on 33 soon. For eForms, we are on the latest version, 3.58.03. We also have augmented routing, which is a eForms solution template we find very, very useful, and we will talk about that a bit more in the slides. You will notice that Concordia is not currently fluid for student-facing pages, so we do use PathLock People UX to make the classic pages mobile-friendly if students want to access it via their tablets or their phones. eForms journey. So we got it installed maybe mid-2022, and then our first student-facing eForm went out at the end of the year, so December 2022, and that was under the previous version, which was 3.50. And then in January earlier this year, we started going Helium. We managed to move everything to 3.58, and we added augmented routing. So there were a lot of changes happening at the same time. And currently in progress since then, we've been working on CI, building query records, getting dashboards for statistics, and also our next project is to integrate payments into eForms. So these are the 5 forms that I'm going to use as an example. That these are basically the 5 that we worked on for the students. We'll go through them in some detail in terms of some of the tricks we had to do to get it working on PDF. But again, we're going through them in detail on how we built each of these. It's highlighting the
Hannah, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think something happened with your audio. You got really faint all of a sudden.
Oh, did I?
Oh, that's
is it better now?
Better?
Yep,
okay,
absolutely. I'll stay closer. Sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, these are the 5 forms that are still currently in progress. We're still improving on them. We get new requests from staff who are currently using them, so it's an ongoing project. So our mandate for this project was to create eForm versions of what was a PDF. So if you look at this PDF, it's a you have to either type it in or fill it by hand. There's a lot of repetitive information that you might have to give. And there's also information that currently in our system we already have. So one of the key points was to not have the student repeat what they already given us in the past or that information that we already have. For example, we have the student's name, departments, we have their transcripts, we know all of these things. So we don't want them to repeat that on a form to us. And that was one of the main goals on this project when we took it on. And it's also that we also had to design a form that, this is one PDF, but we split it into different forms so that we can better manage it. So that was also a change from the old PDF versions where you could just tick off as many as you like, whereas now it's 5 separate forms. We do have some departments have a more modern version using MS Forms, but same issue applies. It doesn't pre-fill everything that we have on the student. So that was challenge number 1, is to get that all sorted out so the student doesn't have to worry about it. So when we met with the 4 faculties, everybody was very happy to say we all follow the same process. It's the same thing. And as we started building it, we realized quickly that it really wasn't the case. There were even names that were for the same process that were going under different names, same steps, but it's on a whole maybe similar, but when you go into the details on how to program the routing, it was very different. And then some had complicated workflow that may not make sense. So we had to make all of this work for all 4 faculties because they're all going to be sharing the same form. The first thing that we did in the requirement gathering meeting is to have them tell us how they want these forms to go. Like, where does it go? Who does it go to? Under what circumstances? And when does the form end? So with that, we gave them a spreadsheet. Tell us how you want to split this form. So do you want to go by departments? Do you want to go by their program? Like, do you want to go by what are the things that you look for when you split your forms? Say arts and science. Do all the science go to one side and then arts go to the other side? So these are all the discussions that we had with them. We had them fill out this spreadsheet on all the approval levels. So at the time we gave 3. So 1 and 2 and 3. We've since expanded. But that was the first thing that they had to do. Just tell us where you want this form to go. Now, there were limitations because at the time it was pre-Helium. We weren't even on Fluid yet because our people tools at the time was not up to date. So we couldn't use the Helium functions, which was very nice. We'll see that later on. The 3.5 eForms at the time didn't have as much configuration power as they do now. So we did a lot of views with developers. And for anything that we couldn't program or do it in time, everything was done by email. So there's a lot of things that were not centralized. And so we've since improved on that. And at the time, we also limited what the student could see. So we did not give student any access to view their own forms. We had a lot of developer involvement for small changes. And we didn't allow the student to save at the time. Well, we don't allow them to recycle as well. So it was just keeping it simple, get the first one out the door, and then see what feedback we get. And because we don't have Fluid and we didn't want to expose the work center, we had to create a new way for a student to access the form. So we introduced the Formatron, which is really a form and a Jumbotron. It's where we want to display all the forms, and that it could be clear and they know where to go once they see the page. So a couple of things that we had to think about was where do we want this page, the access point, to live? It made sense that it was in the student center. And the access that we gave to were only the active students for the first phase, because there were complications with those who have withdrawn. So we just said, active students for now. We needed a way to manage if we wanted to turn off a form. If say there was a cutoff time, we wanted to be able to close it and open it at a certain time. And then last one is basically to allow it to keep growing. So if there were other uses for it, we want to be able to accommodate those too. So we'd have to put that in our design. So this is all custom built. It's basically 2 tabs of configuration. The first tab is the big group. So academic request, graduation, bursary applications, the big items. We can decide the order, we can decide if we want to display or not, and we can give it a name. The second tab on our control page is where we put in the URL for the forms that we want it linked to. So here you'll see the URL is basically copied off the work center. If you have the GT work center, we just copy that, put it right in, give it a title, make sure if we want it to show, then we check off the active box, and then we decide which group it belongs to. So most of the ones that we're talking about today belong to group 1, but we also have others that are maybe convocation and graduation. So there's no limit to how many groups we can put, and also so far no limit on how many forms we can put on. Because it's a URL, we can also link it to non-eForm items. And then we also designed a message catalog so that it displays the description of what the form is doing, so the student has an idea. Open and close date, we also put in close time in case some things don't always cut off at midnight. But generally, we've put a few at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, but most of it is cut off at midnight. And then lastly, if a form was closed, we wanted to make sure the students know that it's closed and know that it's there and to come back next time. So we designed a box so that we could show when to come back, or you passed the deadline, but speak to this department if you need more assistance, just to give students more information. So that's kind of what it looks like. The look is Pathlock UX, and the text that you see here are all under message catalog. And if it's closed, you will have the closed box and explaining why it's closed, and then the button to click to the link will not be active, so they can't actually submit. This is really helpful if we have, say, for example, an upgrade, and we don't want eForms submitted during that upgrade. We can easily turn it off like this. And one thing that's really nice about that is it's mobile responsive. So when it's on a smaller tablet or a phone, it works out. So in terms of form setup, we wanted to show just kind of the things that we did to make our lives a bit easier once the form is created. The first thing we had to decide is how to name things. So thank you to Andrea and Ken from Berkeley. They really helped us get an idea of how to do this. We were given a document by Berkeley to give an idea how to do naming conventions. We've since improved on it, so if you do want to see it, we're happy to share it. It does make our lives easier when we're looking for information. So for segments, for example, that would be one of the first things you would have to set up. We create a 4-letter code that identifies this particular form type. And then for other things, maybe have queries, data pool, grid segments. So data pool, we also start with a 4-letter and then ends with a PR for data pool. And if it's a grid segment, we'll have the GR as an ending. If there are queries, which we use also a lot, it's always CU for Concordia, and then GT, and then the 4-letter code for that form, and the segment that we've seen earlier. There's some things that we really liked in our regular PeopleSoft usage that we wanted to bring into eForms. So the first one was related content. If you've ever tried to do related content, first of all, related content is basically grabbing the information from one page, all the keys, and push it onto a second PeopleSoft page, so you don't have to retype the employee ID or dates or things like that, and it will just do a search for you. So that makes the user's life a lot easier. We wanted to do that on eForms, but the eForms page actually doesn't allow it. It doesn't push out the, say, employee ID from the page. So we had to use a bit of code that GT helped us with, and we've been since adding more of the same setup so that it allows us to do this. So we can click on the student record link or term activation link or document view or quick enroll, and it will just open up with the student ID already input for you. It saves a few clicks from the users, usually for staff. There were other things that require custom code. For example, if you have notifications that you want to go out to a particular user, it's usually defaulted to the address that's on the user profile. But for us at Concordia, we wanted it to be the preferred email, which doesn't always sync with what's on the user profile. So we've added a bit of code to allow us to do that, and it's pretty straightforward, and we reuse it on all of our forms. So that basically says if I want to go to original Opera ID, then the code will send it off to that Opera ID, but the email that is on their preferred email. We also created prompts. Part of our, say, late registration requires us to kind of recreate the class search experience. So prompts were necessary. We did quite a few of these, and this is what it looks like on the back as a view. And then when we put it into the data pool, it will look something like this. So if we just recreated an experience, pick your subject. And then you can pick your course number and then preferred class. Like each of them have their own prompts. All right, so I'm going to hand this over to Alex to talk about security design.
So I'm Alex, and my role here is, apart from creating eForms, I am also the security analyst of our student information system. So I assign security for people. So I took quite a bit of consideration in doing security for Hannah's forms. So we think of role-based security like assigning characters in a heist movie. So the hacker gets the tech, muscle handles the heavy lifting, brains do the planning, but just make sure that nobody's assigned the role of bumbling sidekick. So what I'm going to be covering is security used to grant access to the forms for students, approvers, and administrators, the process of creating the numerous rules required for the approvers, and how we perform the initial deployment of the rules that allow administrators to assign approver access, as well as additional onboarding of subsequent faculties. So for we onboarded students one faculty at a time. We started with fine arts and then went on to arts and science and our business school. So we created a dynamic role query based on the student's primary faculty. So for the add task, we assigned it to a specific role. For the CU G3 students, if it was arts and science, we just put _AS. So, and we assigned the permissionless G3 form user to that, which also gave them access to the formatron. And then once the students had access to the forms, they started filling them out. So what we need for the next task would be evaluation. So the eval task was assigned to form approvers based on form type. So we had 5 different types of forms, and 1 for each department and for each approval level. So in the case of arts and science, I think there were 10 departments. 27 departments for arts and science, what we started, and 3 approval levels. So we did not want to grant approvers access to the eForms Work Center because we've got multiple form families. So there's not just student request forms, there's also award forms and security access forms there. So we wanted to limit what they could see. So we created navigation through People Tools, structure and content to the evaluate search page, as well as the view search pages. So we created a role called CUGT CU student EVL, and that is given access to the evaluate request forms. And so I was counting fine arts before, so based on our calculations, we would require 150 separate roles for fine arts. So 5 forms, 3 approval levels, 10 departments. So as a security analyst, if I was going to have to enter 150 roles manually, that would not be a good day for me. But we've got a tool that will help us to have a better day. So Oracle and PeopleSoft, they provide this tool called Excel to CI, where we can create a template for input for any component interface. For the roles, we were using the role maintenance one. So we can create all the security roles in a single batch once we populated the Excel and execute the process. So once this is done, we hit execute and the roles are now in the system. So this is the role screen in PeopleSoft. So the can grant role, which was on the previous page here, this is what we use to assist us in the future so that security admin does not need to manage all of these roles, and I'll explain that in a little bit. So once these roles have been created in the system, they're available to be assigned to users. So if you remember the template that Hannah showed earlier during the requirement gathering process, we use this template to link the approvers, the staff, with the roles. So this has all been obfuscated here, but we have the username, the net name, and the SIS ID, their email, as well as the approval level 1 and approval level 2. So once that is done, again, we use Excel to CI, and we create an input which has the user ID as well as the role names that would be assigned to them. And we're using the component interface user profile. Once this is done for 150 roles across at least 150 users, this does all the assignment for us. So once that is done, like there's no actual security granted to these approval roles because they're strictly for workflow routing, which Hannah will explain in a bit. So to grant access to the eval page that I showed earlier, we have a dynamic role that is attached to the eval role. So that will pick up any users that match the naming convention of the CUGT form department, and then L1, L2, L3 for each approval level. So that will assign the security to them, and once they've gotten these roles, the eval role will give them access to the eval page. So once these roles are assigned to all the users, who takes over management of the approvers? Because there's a lot of roles, and for the security analyst to manage it would be a bit of a headache. So what we've done is delegated access to the faculty representative. Now that can grant role column that we saw, that is for the CUGT approver setup and as well as the faculty code. So that has been granted to the fac reps, and once that is done, they can then use what in PeopleSoft is distributed user profiles, that those administrators can access the profile of an approver, and then they can go ahead and assign any of these roles that are granted to this FA setup. They can go to that user's distributed user profile. They need to know the Opera ID of the approval, but we provided queries where the manager can look up the Opera ID based on the user's name or other identifier, and then they can add and revoke roles to that particular user. So if they change departments, if they move from a level 1 to a level 2 approver. So once we did that, the 150 roles for fine arts, we also did the arts and science and JMSB, which is our business school, those faculties as well. So imagine we have 27 departments in art and science. That was 405 roles and another 180. So it was a bit of a headache to just sort of create the roles, as in to design the role names. But once that was done, We used Excel to CI to get them all put in, and it's a piece of cake using Excel to CI. Plus, once it's done, managers have the flexibility to control access to the eForms and the approval levels. So I'm going to hand this back over to Hannah now.
Thank you, Alex. So with all that set up, we launched our first version of eForms, and then we got the exciting news that there was a 3.58 eForms coming up, and with that we could use helium, we could go fluid, and it would enable us to do a lot more. So let's talk about our journey going helium. So there were some challenges to getting there. For example, we were waiting for one of our people tools upgrade before we can get 3.58. So that had a delay. We were going fluid and helium at the same time. So an adjustment was made for the users to say, hey, this now looks different. We wanted to give more functionalities for the students to update their requests. So we added the update task. We also allowed the recycling back to the student. And then the last bit is we are now onboarding more faculties. So we have to streamline the process for everybody. So the 3.58 features, they are really awesome. I'm going to talk about some of these just in our use cases, how we use it. It's just to show you that whatever you're thinking of, probably one of these will be able to help you achieve that. So logic stack, which is like your own smart source, button relabeling, it helps us. For some people who don't want to say approved, they just want to say I finalized it. That really helps them. It makes the transition easier. We use a lot more queries and a lot less views. The buttons and segments can all be configured without any code. Validations, which is really fun to use and very useful. And then augmented routing, which is a solution template. It's not part of 3.58, but it works with all the versions. So I'll start with augmented routing because what started off us to getting this installed is because we were refilling in all of the routing tab every single time there was a change that we made a structural change to the approval workflow. So we didn't want to do that anymore. So augmented routing with an effective dated row, we can just click add and it will copy the previous version and we just make our edits on the new effective date. So you'll remember this is what I talked about, the routings. If you use the default version, anytime you try to change if you had to reload it to something else, for example, 9 steps to 10 steps, then you would have to reset everything here, including all the visual ifs and the roles. And ours kind of look like this at the beginning. It's since grown. So imagine having to do that every single time a new faculty was onboarded. It's effective data like mentioned, and there's visual ifs on all rows, just like what we usually do. So that helps us adapt to the 4 faculties sharing the same form. So I'll just show you the look of augmented routing. Basically, you fill in every single split that you want to do. For us, it's by department, and then within each split, there's multiple levels. We started with 3, but now we've gone through a lot more, but this can handle all of that. And it's effective dated, so you know when this change takes place. One thing I really like about augmented routing is that it actually gives me more grip on the data. And what I mean by that is the department here that you see, there's no, some of them are, yes, ACAD org equals something, and then you are, say, for example, education, art education. But there are some that require more visual ifs to say, well, that combination of ACAD plan, of ACAD org, that makes this studio arts ceramics. So by doing that once in augmented routing, I can assign a priority number. And going forward, all I have to do is just call this priority number to know that I'm looking at this particular department. You'll see a bit more when I talk about the routing that we do, but this, all I said is it really helps us not having to do the same visual ifs over and over again. There's also a start true step, which means if there are any routings that's based on a particular field and that field changes throughout the approval process, this will take that into account and route it to whatever version is saved the last time it was approved. So for example, if you have a form that says, oh, go to level 3 only if this amount is greater than 50, and then level 1 changes that amount to maybe 20. So you'll know now the logic has changed. It will no longer go to person number 3. So those are really helpful for us as well to save, sometimes to save time, so people don't need to look at this form. And so this is one of our, what happens in the visual if on the previous slide. You'll see there's academic order equals to our education and department code equals to 0. Now the department code is a field that I created in the form to match the priority that field, the priority number that you saw on the previous slide. Because by default, if you come into a form, nobody has looked at it yet, it will be 0. So the routing would go to, by default, our education. But if someone went in and changed that field into a 20 from, say, 0, then that means it came from somebody else. So maybe a math department looked at it and said, this is not math, this is our education. They can pick that field and say, go to our education. So by default, we always this is kind of our standard look. And we try to standardize that for every form going forward so that it gives the student the same look and feel. So say applied human arts and science, the applied human sciences has a priority of number of 105. The priority really is, it goes from the top to the bottom. So the order doesn't super matter in our case until I get to the very last one. But I mainly use it so that I can call a particular department. And so within this particular visual if, we're looking for anybody who fits this criteria, either you're originally applied human sciences or somebody changed you into applied human sciences. One of the approvers may have changed you to that. And the code is 105. So then the next time it goes through, it's a resubmit, it will get to the right department. So the idea is we created this choose action field, and within it there's approve, deny, reroute, or recycle, which is we label it notify student of missing information. And then if you say I want to reroute to another department, that means I don't need to look at this form, this belongs to somebody else. Then this is where the new department where they can select it. And the department code 70, that's the priority field in augmented routing. And then once they're done, we do a confirmation page, making sure that this is what they want to do. And the reroute to another department is really the resubmit button. It's the only way we can get all of that logic to reset and send off to the right department. So we just relabel that. And the submit, this is pretty standard. You can name your own buttons. And this is the music. So if you want to go to music, you have to fit one of these criteria. And then when you do that, you've switched it off to music, and it comes off the arts and the art education person's list. So it's not random, the number that we assign, it's by faculty. We have the 100, 200, and now we have the 300 series with more faculties being onboarded. The 500 usually is the last one. It just means I want to catch anybody who does not fit into any of these. So it's possible that we missed one particular combination, but we don't want them to just fall right through, because if that happens, it goes straight to executed. The student will have no idea what happened. So it comes to us, the form admins, if that happens. So the next one I want to talk about is logic stack. So this is a way to build your own smart sources. Very helpful, especially in our cases where we have to clear out conflicting information. What I mean by that is students might say, oh, field A, yes, and then they move on, and then field B shows up. But then they fill in field B, and then they go, oh, wait, field A, I got it wrong. Change field A to answer. And then the field B value no longer is relevant. So we want to clear them out to avoid any type of confusion. And this is how we do it. We create a smart source, and we say constant. The N is just to basically clearing the checkbox from yes to no. And then within that logic, the visual if is if you have a professor's note equals to Y, then we automatically clear whatever field into no. And then we set it up in the initialize from smart source, and we put in our smart source, the logic stack we created, and then update every time it changes. And what that does is this. So if it's a no, the second box will show up and the student fills it in, but then they go, wait, I do have it. So the second box disappears, but also at the same time, we want the value to clear. So it no longer records whatever they had before. Less views, more queries. Very quickly, it's just creating a query that you usually would use with your own criteria, with your own fields. And then what you can do is set up a prompt, which here you see in the middle, the empl ID equals to a prompt, and that prompt will be what links us to the data pool. So here you can put more than one prompt. I just put empl ID for this particular one. And then you save it. You must save it as a process and public for it to work. And then in your setup for data pools, it will ask you what the keys are. The prompts are your keys in the query. So empl ID equals the PageRec empl ID. And then because for this case, I am trying to populate a grid with my query. So I have to basically link the two together. There are documentations on how to do this on GT site, but this is our example. And this is what it looks like. So when the student goes into the add task for this particular form, what they'll see is all of the courses that qualifies them, and then they just have to select one. So basically, this is all the read-only fields are from the query, and then all they have to do is select from the drop-down to say, yes, I want this course. Sometimes we've done a lot of stuff without any coding, but some code is still required. For example, that same grid, if I only want it to show on, say, an email template with the ones that are only selected to Y, then because we don't want the template to populate with a bunch of rows that they didn't select, that requires a bit of code. But it wasn't too hard, and we can easily replicate it for other forms. So this is kind of what it looks like. It only shows that single row that the student had selected. Buttons. So this is the fun part where we get to relabel a lot of things, decide when they want to show up. One of the things we found through testing is that people are confused no matter what. So we have to make it as simple as possible, as straightforward as possible. There's no room for them to select the wrong button. So for in this case, the approve and deny, for example, they only show up if certain values are selected in the process of the approval. What I mean by that is the choose action, which we created the 4 actions you can choose, approve, deny, reroute, or notify student. If that is equal to AP, which is approved, then, which is selecting this, then when it's finally time to press the button, the only one that will show up is the approve. So they can't say I want to approve on one page and then click the deny button. Similarly with deny, if action is equal to DE for deny, then that means they selected denied, and then they have to tell the student why it's been denied. And then when they go on to pressing the button, the only one that will show up would be the deny button. So this just ensures that there's no weird combination of denying something and then actually approving it. We want to make it as straightforward as possible. Validation. So these are really useful when you want to stop somebody from moving on to the next page without having filled out something that was important, or if they have some type of combination that doesn't make any sense. For us, my big discovery was that there's a big difference between validations and required. So if you've configured before, you'll know that the field, you can say this is a required field. However, if this ever is a checkbox, the checkbox is always defaulted to no. So there's already a value within it. So it actually passes the test of required, because required field only looks for some type of value in there. It doesn't matter what. So what happened was we would say, check this box if you have read the terms and conditions, and we set it up as a required field, and it always passes even if the student didn't say yes. The reason being it's a no, and no is a required value. It's an accepted value. Whereas validations, you can say only pass if that field is set to yes. So that stops the students from being able to move on without checking off the terms and conditions box. So this is basically what we set up. I've consulted the website. I want to continue. Yes. So if it's not equal to yes, we don't let you through. And that is a checkbox. So this is the setup for it. So here I did not use the required button. We didn't need to because we have validations. So this is kind of what it looks like. And we can decide what text we want to show if the student didn't meet the requirements. Comment segment. This was something that I think came up in discussions a lot. There's a default comment segment that shows up automatically in the previous versions. And for our staff, they always get confused. Am I typing here or am I typing in the ones that we created for them? So we just decide to hide them, but then show it only when it's relevant. Attachments used to only be available at the last page. Sometimes it didn't make sense for us, so it was nice to be able to move it to any page we wanted to in the whether it's a evaluate or an add or an update. So this, for example, was us not having it on the last page because usually the last page we use it for confirmation, making sure that everything is what they want it to be. So we want this to be in the middle pages, and that allowed us to do it. And so this is kind of a student's journey through our student center. We created a link on this on the left-hand side. They come to the Formatron. They pick what they want to register, what they want to submit. And then they go in, it's the fluid look, and they fill out the courses as they intend to. So this is kind of recreating the class search experience. It required maybe 3 or 4 views, but we did it. It was very nice to have it kind of replicate that experience. We were trying to avoid any type of free typing if possible, but we still left free typing space just in case they couldn't find it for whatever reason. So the person uploads and then they submit. And then at the submit, we tell them, thank you very much. And this is the email address we're communicating with, because we get a lot of students saying, I don't know where that email went. So this is a confirmation saying that's the preferred email that you set up in the system and we're sending it there. Recycling was a new for us that we added in earlier this year. It allows the staff to go back to the student and say you missed something, and we changed it to notify student of missing information so that staff don't get confused. One last thing that we talk about is the setup, because like I said, every form is shared by 4 faculties. The notifications are also they're set up on the same page, but every faculty has their own version of their notifications. And the visual if will basically decide what version of the email the student gets. So for example, if it's for fine arts, then we say if the routing, remember the priority number, that's between 19 and 99, or that nobody ever changed it, so it's 0 and the faculty code is equal to FA. So that means you are either by default a fine arts student or somebody routed you to a fine art department. And same thing with another department for our engineering school. If your code is originally this code and nobody ever tried to reroute you, or somebody routed you and the number is between 300 and 399, then you'll get the engineering school version of the notification. And lastly, sometimes not everything fits. We've had a lot of requests to integrate, but some of them get a bit too long and too complicated. We had a request to add somebody as a level 5. And in the end, we decided we're going to just simplify that as an email to that person and not add the person as an actual approver. Maybe in the future versions we'll change that, but for now, that's kind of worked out. So this basically decides if the level 3 person wants to push it further into for us, it's called a committee. So they decide if an email goes out to them. So with all of that, what we're really proud of is we are the first at Concordia to give it a try on Fluid, because we've never done that before. We've reimagined this resubmit button to allow us to reroute and change directions after the form has been submitted. I think we made a good impression. To date, we have over 2,000 eForms on these 5 particular forms submitted. The formature design was quite nice, and other uses have been explored from, and they want a version of it too. So that's we quite like that. Active feedback, we continue to improve on what we can do, and we're learning things like seminars, like lunch and learns like this. We're trying to get new ideas to improve the result with users, and we got really good support from GT and our own developers and PSAs. Things we learned, there was a lost reference to attachments when we converted to heliums for the forms that were not helium when they were submitted. At the time, GT helped us basically run a code and get that linked back, because all the files were there. They were stored on our file server, but somehow it lost the link between the two. We decided that we want to show users the initial design early as possible, so that they can tell us, hey, I forgot to tell you that, hey, this email also goes out, which is what we heard a lot, is like, when you're thinking about a PDF, it's just an email and people forward it, but we actually have to code all of that in eForms. There was a bit of resistance, but I think people have accepted it, that they've seen the benefits of using eForms and not PDFs, and it's a more secure way to do it as well. And with eForms, you can also run stats. So this is using the most basic tables that we have on GT. We didn't even start, we haven't even really explored the query record building to do stats yet. It was just basically all the key fields that when you build a form, it would give you. And we can create these beautiful charts, and that will convince maybe more people to sign on and say, this is really nice. So I'm just going to conclude and say, we always get it's a simple form. Why is it taking so long? It is a simple form when you look at it as a piece of paper, but imagine think about all of the routing a person's brain has to do to know this form goes where, gets stamped by who, send back to who. So take a moment to appreciate, like, it's a big computer that you have in your head, and it is the best computer that you'll have come across. And with that, thank you very much. I hope I didn't go over time too long. I'm happy to take any questions.
That was great, Hannah. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I loved your closing comment about, it's just a simple form. How can it take so long? And that is something that we've talked about for years, that it's really easy and fast to build a dumb form. You can set up a form with just fields on a page, essentially, in less than an hour. But it's really all the thought that happens behind the scenes and what you want that user experience to be and how much of that process you want to have automated as part of that forms transaction that you end up putting in the work. And can you comment to that end, can you comment about the amount of time that you spend in design versus configuration and development?
Oh, that's a good one. I think at the beginning, if we go back to the very beginning, it was a lot of hearing about a request and thinking, how can I do it? And then actually trying it out and then running into walls and going back to design. So it was a lot of looping back and forth. I have a design in my head, doesn't mean it will work. So yeah, I like that probably took up the most of it, because once you get into configuring, it's a lot easier when you've tested it once and you can replicate that experience later on. And especially for us with 5 forms, we test it on one. If it works, and we replicate it for all 5. So the design is, it's important to get it right at the beginning. It's also important to know what types of features are available at your disposal. So we spent maybe a good 2-3 months just playing with it. Like, we didn't know at the time when we got it, we didn't know anything about it. We took the training, but when it came time to build, we didn't really know that much. So it took time for us to just play with it, fail a few times, and then once we got a sort of a prototype going, we can replicate that for the other forms.
And for the forms that you guys have built, what would you say is the allocation of effort between functional versus technical, config versus development?
If you're pre 3.58, I would say maybe half and half, just because there were a lot of views that we needed that we didn't have records for. So we needed to create views. We needed to kind of experiment with how to get them, say, populating a grid. That used to be development. After 3.58, I sometimes still call my developer, but not as much, because a lot of them is we can create our own versions of it. So yeah, that I think that may be switched to a maybe 80-20 after the 3.58 came out.
Fantastic. That's awesome. And if anybody else has questions that you want to pose, let us know. Feel free to enter those in the chat. Hannah, what form are you most proud of?
Oh, I mean, the 5 kind of follow the same flow, but I would definitely say the late withdrawal had the most challenges in it because it went to people that were not part of department. So we've added Office of the Registrar to be involved in the process. I think I'm proud of all of them, but I'm most proud of augmented routing, where we were able to use that and really explore all the functionalities that came with it.
Nice. I see there's a question from Leanne. This is a question geared more towards GT, but do you know if there is any work being done to allow functional users to use query records from the data pool for fields that we designate as prompts? Currently, we can only use views or records for prompt field types. Lynette, do you want to come off mute and see if there's something there that you can respond to? Lynette, are you there?
Yes. Let me just, sorry, my camera's, let's see. Sorry, I was on my different camera. Okay, so for query records, let's see. So, sorry. So when I hear query records, I think of the GT eForm framework query records. But I think in this context, you're just thinking of queries. So we have and would absolutely love to extend the functionality of joining a query to the data pool and have that function as a prompt. Within PeopleSoft, we're actually using delivered PeopleSoft prompt functionality. So when you see that little magnifying glass, it's a requirement of PeopleSoft that there's actually a physical record within there in order to draw it. So that's why we're not able to use it. And that's the one restriction on joining to data pools, is that we just can't, PeopleSoft just won't let us draw the prompt results without having an actual record to reference. I know it's something that in future releases of eForms, as we start moving towards some of the new functionalities and we cross over into a world where we're kind of supporting also cloud usage as well, that opens up some additional tools to us in terms of what we can do for development. So it's on our wish list for sure of things that we would like to see in the future. But we also are just facing some struggles in terms of making that work inside of PeopleSoft, and also ensuring that the performance isn't impacted on the form, so that the ability to configure that prompt would then make the form unusable.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. If not, we'll give folks back about 5.5 minutes of your day. Again, everybody will receive an email with a link to the recording that you guys can go ahead and view and share that with others if you'd like. It will also be posted in the resource library for GT eForms clients. And if there is ever anything that you guys have questions on, please feel free to reach out to us at info@gideontaylor.com, or if you've got questions specifically of Hannah and Alex, based on what they talked about today and what Concordia is up to, feel free to reach out to them on the emails that Hannah provided there on her slide. And we thank you. We look forward to hopefully having you guys join us for the webinar in January, where we'll be showing off the new PeopleSoft Insights template for GT eForms with Western University up in Ontario. And I'll put a plug out there for those of you who are in higher education and members of the HUG organization. There is the new GT advisory group, the GT eForms advisory group, that I encourage you guys to get involved with. It's a very active community of GT eForms users within the HUG community. You can find them online on the HUG website and subscribe to that forum. And there will be more, I think, quarterly meetings of that organization to help with tips and tricks and challenges on GT eForms, just trying to accelerate education and share knowledge. So on behalf of Gideon Taylor, I thank everybody who's part of that organization, particularly the committee. And I think that's it. Hannah, Alex, anything else on your end?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for joining, and we hope to see you all in Hug as well in New Orleans.
Very good. Yeah, for those of you who are attending Alliance in New Orleans, there'll be a lot of Gideon Taylor there, and we look forward to sharing more at that time. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.